In 2010, Hollywood attempted something fans thought was impossible, replacing Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. The result? One of the most hated horror remakes ever made. But the real question is, was it actually that bad? What's up, guys? Welcome back to Mike's Movie Room, and in today's video we are diving deep into A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake. In 1984, Wes Craven introduced the world to one of the most recognizable figures in horror history, Freddy Krueger. The Nightmare on Elm Street franchise had its fair share of ups and downs throughout its original 7-film run. It all started with a terrifying first movie that introduced us to the Dream Demon himself. In that film, Freddy is pure nightmare fuel, leaning heavily into straight horror. He still cracks jokes, but they're cruel, mean-spirited, and unsettling. But as the series went on, Freddy slowly became more and more comedic, eventually turning almost cartoonish by the end of the franchise. Then we have A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, which might actually feature the most terrifying looking version of Freddy. But the movie itself doesn't really feel like a Nightmare on Elm Street film. Just the fact that Freddy Krueger comes to the real world in a pool party to kill people that aren't even sleeping makes absolutely no sense. It's often considered the black sheep of the franchise, especially because of the controversy surrounding the film's heavy gay undertones and the treatment of lead actor Mark Patton after its release by the director and many others. If you haven't seen it already, I definitely recommend checking out the documentary Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. It does a great job explaining everything that happened with that movie, and finally gives Mark Patton the credit he deserves. Then came A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors, which many fans consider the perfect balance between horror and comedy for Freddy Krueger. And the Dream Warriors themselves are also a fantastic group of characters, and is personally my favorite in the franchise behind the original. But, unfortunately, that's also where the franchise really began to fall off. The horror elements slowly disappear, and Freddy turns into more of a joke-cracking killer, which kills a lot of the suspense. Each sequel becomes more over the top than the last. The series eventually ends with Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare, and instead of getting a powerful send-off for the character, we got what was arguably the most disrespectful version of Freddy up to that point. Thankfully, Wes Craven returned a few years later to give us Wes Craven's New Nightmare. It's still divisive amongst some fans, but overall, it's a really strong film. The only problem is, just like Part 2, it doesn't quite feel like a traditional Nightmare on Elm Street film. Because it really isn't. The film plays with a meta concept that Wes Craven eventually perfected with the Scream franchise, but in New Nightmare, all the Nightmare on Elm Street films exist as movies, and a real demon begins taking the form of Freddy Krueger to enter the real world. It's a pretty cool concept, and it brings back a darker version of Freddy Krueger, but it still doesn't fully feel like the Freddy we know now. So it's not one I really visit that often. Then in 2003, we got the true swan song from Robert Englund, his final full performance as Freddy Krueger in Freddy vs. Jason, unless you want to count his brief cameo in The Goldbergs. And I know Freddy vs. Jason has its flaws, but honestly, it's a really entertaining movie, and if that's the last time we're going to see Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, it's a pretty good send-off. And that really was the last time we saw the real Freddy Krueger. Until 2010, when Hollywood decided to bring him back. But instead of Freddy Krueger, we got something else entirely. An imposter Freddy, in what would become one of the most hated horror remakes ever made. So after nearly 30 years of Freddy Krueger haunting our dreams, Hollywood decided it was time to bring him back for a new generation. In 2010, Platinum Dunes, the production company run by Michael Bay, released their remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. By that point, Platinum Dunes had already produced several horror remakes, including the Amityville Horror and the Friday the 13th remake from 2009, which I really believe is extremely overhated, and if you haven't seen my breakdown yet, I definitely recommend checking that out. But this remake would end up being the last horror remake the company ever produced. Director Samuel Bayer was actually hesitant to take the job. He had mostly directed commercials and music videos and had already turned down several offers from Platinum Dunes. In fact, he turned down this movie twice. It wasn't until he received a long email from Michael Bay explaining how directing the film could open up his career that Bayer finally agreed to direct the project. Unfortunately, that career boost never really came. Following the extreme backlash to this film, Bayer has not directed another feature film since. Replacing Freddy Krueger was never going to be easy. For almost 3 decades, the character had been defined by the performance of Robert Englund, and that's actually something pretty rare in the horror genre. Most horror icons have been played by multiple actors over the years. Characters like Leatherface, Michael Myers, and Jason Voorhees have all had several different actors portray them. But Freddy Krueger was different. From the original Nightmare on Elm Street all the way through Freddy vs. Jason, Freddy had only ever been played by one man, Robert Englund. There are only a few horror icons that have had the same level of consistency. Brad Dourif has voiced Chucky in every major entry of the Child's Play franchise, except for the reboot, which we might do a video on that at some point down the road. Anthony Perkins played Norman Bates throughout the original Psycho films, and more recently, David Howard Thornton has become the face of Art the Clown in the Terrifier series. Someone else technically played Art in All Hallows Eve, but Thornton has portrayed the character in all the main Terrifier films, and the role is very much his now. So when the remake announced that someone other than Robert Englund would play Freddy Krueger, fans were already skeptical. The role ultimately went to Jackie Earle Haley, who had recently received major attention for his role in Watchmen. And when I saw that movie when it came out, and seeing Rorschach, I was like, wow, this dude could honestly play a pretty good Freddy, just with the voice and how he talked and carried himself. Haley even signed a contract for 3 films, meaning the studio clearly hoped this remake would launch a brand new Nightmare franchise. But one of the biggest changes in the remake was the way Freddy himself was portrayed. The makeup team wanted Freddy to look more realistic, basing the design on actual burn victims. The makeup process was intense, at first taking 6 hours every day to apply before eventually being reduced to about 3 hours. Some of Jackie Earle Haley's face was even covered in green screen material, so parts of it could be digitally altered later in post-production. They also digitally altered Freddy's voice to give him a more supernatural sound, which I think Jackie's regular voice would have worked just fine. If he sounded just like Rorschach, that would have been good enough. But despite all that technical effort, something about this version of Freddy just didn't work. And I think the biggest reason comes down to how the movie handles Freddy as a character. In the original films, Freddy was already a monster. He was a child killer, which is horrifying, but the movie still had a twisted sense of fun. Freddy had personality, he cracked cruel jokes, and Robert Englund brought a dark charisma to the role that made him strangely entertaining to watch. But the remake changes Freddy in a way that makes the entire movie feel gross. Instead of just implying he killed children, the remake leans heavily into the idea that Freddy was a full-blown child abuser. And that shift completely changes the tone of the character. It stops being fun horror and starts feeling grimy and uncomfortable. Freddy was always meant to be scary, but also fun to watch. In the remake, he's just disturbing. And not in a good way. Now, with all that being said, the remake isn't completely without merit. Even people who dislike the movie can usually agree that it did a few things pretty well. One of the most interesting ideas the movie introduces is micro-naps. The idea that if you stay awake long enough, your brain begins slipping into sleep just for a few seconds at a time. And during those moments, Freddy can still reach you. It's a really cool concept and leads to some of the best sequences in the entire movie. Another positive is Jackie Earle Haley's performance. Replacing Robert Englund was nearly impossible, but Haley clearly took the role seriously and brought a darker energy to the character. And I really do believe, with a better written script, Jackie Earle Haley could have been accepted as the new Freddy Krueger. Visually, the film also has some interesting dream imagery, but at the same time, that approach creates one of the remake's biggest problems. In the original film, the dreams often looked almost identical to reality, which meant you didn't always know when the characters were dreaming until something strange happened. You discovered it at the same time they did. But in the remake, the visuals almost always look dreamlike from the start. Everything feels hazy and stylized, which removes a lot of the suspense because you already know Freddy's somewhere near. Another major issue is the heavy reliance on CGI. I will always say practical effects will always be king. The original Nightmare films used practical effects that gave the dream sequences a physical, unsettling feel. Perfect example is the iconic scene where Freddy pushes through the bedroom wall above Nancy's bed. That effect was done practically, and it still looks amazing today. But when the remake recreates that same moment using CGI, oh boy, it is the worst looking CGI I have ever seen. It's far less convincing, and it feels artificial instead of eerie and dreamlike. And it's a great reminder that practical effects often age far better than digital ones. So when the remake was finally released in April 2010, the studio had high hopes it would relaunch the franchise. The film had a production budget of about $35 million, which is more than any other Nightmare on Elm Street film in the franchise. And at first, it looked like the gamble might pay off. It opened to strong numbers and even set the record at the time for the biggest midnight opening ever for a horror movie. By the end of its run, the movie made over $115 million worldwide. So financially, it was technically a success. But once again, the reaction from fans and critics told a very different story. The film currently sits at about 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, with audiences giving it around 43%, and I still don't know how it's that high. And all that negative reaction ultimately killed any plans for sequels. Even people connected to the original films had mixed feelings. Robert Englund was fairly respectful towards the remake and praised Jackie Earle Haley as a talented actor, but he also admitted he felt strange seeing someone else play Freddy. Meanwhile, Wes Craven was far more critical and said the remake lacked the imagination that made the original movie special, and didn't even know it was being made until months into production. But the most controversial part of the remake is Freddy's backstory. For much of the film, it hints that Freddy might actually have been innocent, that the parents of Elm Street may have wrongfully killed him. If the movie had committed to that idea, it could have been a fascinating twist, but instead the film ultimately reveals that Freddy was guilty all along, which only makes the movie feel darker and more uncomfortable without adding much to the story. Freddy Krueger was always meant to be terrifying, but he was also meant to be entertaining. Robert Englund understood that balance perfectly. The 2010 remake never quite figured that out. And in trying to reinvent one of horror's most iconic villains, it ended up creating a nightmare that most fans would rather forget.
It's because you're in my world now, bitch!
So yeah, guys, I guess money doesn't mean everything with remakes, because even if you're making money, if fan reception and critic reception is absolutely down the drain, then those planned sequels you ain't never gonna get. So what, Jackie Earle Haley and Rooney Mara, who we'll get to in a few minutes, they both signed a contract to appear in 3 Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and clearly that never happened, so there's remakes where certain directors and writers understand the properties and pay respect to them. Friday the 13th, I'm talking about you. And then there's certain writers and directors that try and do their own thing, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The Hills Have Eyes kind of changed how the main cannibals are, and it actually worked. I really enjoyed that movie. But honestly, with Nightmare on Elm Street and how they changed Freddy Krueger, it just didn't work. It didn't work for me, and it didn't work for a lot of fans. And I totally understand making horror movies dark and grimy and gritty feeling, and there's certain horror movies that make you feel uncomfortable, and that's the point. But when Freddy Krueger's so recognized for being that one horror icon that kind of cracks jokes just like Chucky, you kind of still expect that somewhat. I mean, I don't want it like the later movies, like fucking Nightmare on Elm Street 5, Freddy's Dead. I don't like that shit. But I think honestly 3 and part 4 isn't really that bad with the comedic element. So I really feel like that's where they dropped the ball. They could have made him more menacing like he was in part 1 and part 2, but they just stripped the fun out of the character completely. So when you watch it, you just get this grimy feeling throughout the whole thing, especially how they changed his background and made him legitimately like the worst of the worst. So it just doesn't feel like a Freddy Krueger movie. If there's people that can watch this and they enjoy it, then, I mean, good for you. I'm happy you enjoy this take on the movie, but it's just not for me. Like I said earlier, it would have been more interesting if they would have stayed with the take on he was actually innocent, and that's why he's going after everybody, because he was wrongfully murdered. But no, they played with that idea, and then they ended up making him guilty. So it works for the movie, but it's just not a Nightmare on Elm Street movie I'm going to ever want to watch. I feel like they got Freddy Krueger completely wrong. And I don't know what was up with Rooney Mara, but you can see her in interviews after the film came out where she said that she almost quit acting because of this movie. She didn't enjoy being there. She absolutely hated it. And you can tell by watching it because it's the most dry performance I've ever seen. And she's like a good actress, but if you don't have any love for what you're doing, why would you sign a 3-movie contract? If you didn't enjoy it, you didn't like the script, you fucking hated being there the whole time, why are you taking the money? I mean, at least put in some bit of effort and actually act, because it's like, maybe I'm in the minority here, but dude, her acting is absolutely trash. I mean, she's not even acting. She's just, yeah, huh, oh. So I don't know, man. It just wasn't for me. And then there's Jackie Earle Haley. So he did a great job with what he had. Honestly, like I said earlier, if there was probably a better written script and a better movie overall, he would have probably been accepted as the new Freddy Krueger. He's not really the problem. It's the writing, like I said. So he played a good Freddy Krueger with what he had, but the issue is he didn't really seem to respect the character, so it just kind of like leaves a bad taste in your mouth. There's an interview where he said he went and watched the Nightmare on Elm Street films, or maybe he just watched the first one. I think he said he watched the first one. He said it was the worst movie he ever seen, and it was stupid. So it's kind of wild saying that, and then going and portraying this character and being the only other person to do it after Robert Englund is kind of like a slap in the face, even though you did a good job. It's just kind of like, why would you even want to take on the role if you don't even like the other movies? I guess you want to just kind of make it your own, but it didn't really work out too well now, did it? And I'm kind of ranting at this point, but the CGI in this movie is absolute trash, man. It doesn't hold up. You know it's bad, and I may be in the minority on this, but you know it's bad. When that alleyway scene with Freddy Krueger where he's holding his arms out and you can tell it's literally like fake arms on string, it's bad when that looks better and more convincing than some of the shit that's in this movie, especially if you go watch it now. It's rough. I'm talking rough like a dog rough, okay? So yeah, honestly, looking back on it, you can see bits and pieces of a movie that could have actually been really, really good, and they just kind of blew it, man. Like, they tried some things, it ended up not working. It kind of took the essence of Freddy Krueger and threw it out the window, and took the entertainment aspect out of it. I feel like the thing that's missing from this movie is the fun aspect. And what I mean by that is, with all these old horror icons, and even the newer ones like Art the Clown, you're rooting for the bad guy because even though they're like vicious clown killers, or Jason Voorhees is like a zombie, Michael Myers is the essence of evil, Chucky is like an evil voodoo doll trying to get Andy. It's hard to explain, but there's this fun aspect. You love watching them do what they do, and you have a great time with it. You love watching the kills, watching the gore. There's just this aspect of fun to it, and I don't really know how to put my finger on it, but when you make it too serious, I mean, the Friday the 13th remake was definitely more dark and serious, but it was still fun to watch. It was more intimidating, but it was still fun to watch and see what kind of cool creative kills Jason was going to do. And you don't really get that in this movie. You get Freddy saying one-liners, but they're not funny. They're genuinely fucking creepy. It just took the fun aspect out of it, and that's honestly my opinion. I may get slaughtered down in the comments for this. I don't know. Definitely drop a comment down below and let me know if I'm in the minority on this. Alrighty, guys, so those are my thoughts and opinions on the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Definitely drop a comment down below and let me know if you guys agree with my opinions, or if you guys want to start a debate on why you feel like this movie is overhated and deserves more respect. Definitely love to chat it up with you guys. And I just want to say thanks to everybody who's been subscribing and supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. I'm getting a decent amount of comments on some of my videos, so it's getting hard to respond to everybody, but I'm trying. I definitely love talking to you guys and chatting it up with everybody. And for those of you who haven't already, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you like content like this and want to see more. And if you guys want to follow me on TikTok and Instagram, I'm going to try and be more active on there and post some videos that I don't post on YouTube. And last but not least, definitely let me know what you guys want to see me cover next. And I almost forgot, guys, for all you Freddy fans, I don't know how well you guys can see this. I might post a little video up here of a little close-up, but this is a replica Freddy glove that I got signed by the man himself. Check that out. Michael, this is God. Freddy Krueger, Robert Englund. But yeah, just thought that was pretty sick. So I actually got to meet Robert Englund at a convention a couple years ago. He's super cool, super down-to-earth dude. If you guys ever get the chance to meet him at a convention, definitely recommend it. Alrighty, guys, I've been yapping enough. Until next time, Mike's Movie Room, I'm out of here. Peace.